there is a particular kind of heavy that settles over you when everything seems to be falling apart at the same time. It is not one clean, singular pain that you can point to and work through. It is the job situation and the relationship and the money and the health scare and the friendship that went quiet all arriving at once, stacking on top of each other until the weight of it becomes so ordinary that you stop expecting it to lift. You wake up and the problems are still there. You go to sleep and they follow you. And somewhere in the middle of all of it, between the stress and the exhaustion and the creeping sense that maybe this is just how your life is now, you lose something even harder to name. You lose the feeling that things can actually get better. And that loss, more than any single problem you are facing, is the thing that will undo you if you let it. The first thing worth saying, and I mean this without a single drop of toxic positivity, is that the feeling that nothing is going right is almost never an accurate description of reality. It is an accurate description of where your attention currently lives. When we are under sustained pressure, the brain enters a state that researchers call a negativity spiral, where each piece of bad news makes the next piece feel more inevitable, and the good things that are still quietly present in your life become essentially invisible to your perception. This is not weakness. This is not you being dramatic. This is a well-documented neurological response to prolonged stress, and understanding that it is happening to you rather than believing it as a factual report about your life is the very first step out of it. The spiral feels like truth. It is not truth. It is a filter, and filters can be changed. Just be grateful. Focus on the positive. Things could be worse. These sentences are not wrong exactly, but they are delivered as if the person saying them has never actually sat inside a season where everything hurt at once. What nobody tells you is that you are not supposed to feel better right away, and chasing that feeling, scrambling for immediate relief, is often what makes the whole thing worse. The pressure to feel okay, on top of everything else you are already carrying, becomes its own burden. And so the first genuinely useful thing you can do when nothing is going right is to stop demanding that you feel better immediately and instead give yourself full, unconditional permission to be exactly where you are. Think about what it actually means to be in a season where everything is hard. In almost every case, beneath the chaos and the stress and the failures, something important is happening. Steve Jobs was fired from Apple, the company he built from nothing, at 30 years old. He described the public humiliation and the disorientation that followed as one of the heaviest periods of his life. And then he said something that gets quoted a lot but rarely examined deeply enough, that being fired was the best thing that ever happened to him, because it freed him to enter his most creative period and eventually return to Apple and build it into what it became. Now I am not telling you that your suffering is secretly a blessing in disguise, because that framing can be its own form of dismissal. What I am saying is that the seasons of life that feel most like falling apart are very often the seasons where the most fundamental rebuilding is happening underneath the surface, in ways you cannot see yet because you are standing too close to the rubble. The practical thing that actually helps, and I say this from experience rather than theory, is not to try to fix everything at once. When your whole life feels broken, the instinct is to address all of it, to solve the job and the relationship and the money simultaneously, and that instinct is the thing that will exhaust you into paralysis. What actually works is something almost embarrassingly small. Pick one thing, the smallest possible thing, that you have genuine control over, and do it completely. Make your bed. Cook one real meal. Go outside for 20 minutes. Reply to one email you have been avoiding. Not because these things will fix your life, they will not, but because the brain in crisis desperately needs evidence that it still has agency, that it is still capable of completing something, that the world still responds to its actions. That evidence, built one tiny completed thing at a time, is what slowly begins to interrupt the story that everything is hopeless. There is also something almost no one talks about when it comes to hard seasons, and it is this: the people who come out of them strongest are almost never the ones who fought the hardest to feel better. They are the ones who got honest about what the season was asking them to release. Every genuinely difficult period in a person's life carries within it an invitation, usually an uncomfortable one, to let go of something that was no longer serving them. A relationship that had quietly died. A version of themselves they had outgrown. An identity built on external achievement that was never really theirs to begin with. The suffering is often the resistance to that release. And when people finally stop white-knuckling their way through and actually ask the question, what is this period trying to show me that I have been refusing to look at, the answer that comes back is almost always clarifying in a way that the good times never could have been. None of this is easy, and I am not pretending it is. Some seasons are genuinely brutal and they deserve to be called that without softening. But there is a difference between acknowledging that something is hard and deciding that hard means permanent. There is a difference between sitting with pain honestly and building a life inside it. The people who feel better eventually are not the people who had easier circumstances. They are the people who, at some point in the middle of the mess, made a quiet decision to stay curious about their own life instead of just suffering through it. They asked what was still working instead of only cataloging what was not. They took the smallest possible action they could manage on the hardest possible day. And they trusted, not blindly, not naively, but with the kind of hard-won faith that only comes from having survived difficult things before, that this season too would eventually reveal what it came to teach them. That trust is not something anyone can hand you. But it is something you can choose to practice, even today, even now, even in the middle of everything.